Good morning, folks. It is Tuesday. We have another great show today. We are talking with Judy Copenbarger. This is Money Truth Moments. And we apologize. We're running a little late because we had some technical difficulties here on my end. But we're here. Good to see you, Judy.
Good to see you, Carlos. Good morning.
Hey, we have a great show today, and I want to jump right into it. Today, we're going to be discussing let me just share it with you guys here. We're going to be talking about married with teenage children. And so a lot of folks have been asking about this. I know that you also have a book, which is awesome. And we were kind enough to actually get a copy of the book, which is Teen Cash. So we may touch on this as well, too. But one of the things I wanted to get started on with you is families are talking about how do I prepare my kids for work or to be independent? That's one of the things that keeps coming up quite a bit. And not only for teenagers, but also at a younger age as well, too. So maybe we can start with that.
Absolutely. I love this question. You know, the best way to master anything is to practice. And I think in a lot of households, kids are not really involved with the family finances. And so how are they going to know? How are they going to know the real value of money, what it really costs to run a house and pay for the utilities and keep the cell phone going? Heaven forbid we lose our Wi-Fi, right?
Right.
If they don't have any clue, they're going to either have a rude awakening, which is how a lot of us learned, right? Or they're going to learn it in a skilled set environment in school, college, maybe from a parent or a grandparent or a mentor. But most people really just learn from hard knocks. And I think we ought to give them soft knocks when they're little. Maybe that's the next.
I like that.
Soft knocks.
Yeah.
Where they get knocked around, they get to practice, but they learn the value of money and how to deal with it. You know, if a kid saves their own money for a toy or some special, sports item or game or something, they're going to really take care of it because they know they had to rake a lot of leaves. They had to stack a lot of things on the patio. And they're going to take care of it. And they're going to learn that it doesn't just, fall from the sky. Somebody has to do something. There has to be some effort for the money to show up, which we trade for value for the things that make our life work. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of reminds me too, you're absolutely right. Because when I had to buy certain things that I wanted, I would just be one of those kids where I forgot how to share it because I don't want nobody touching my stuff because I worked hard for it. So if I loaned it to somebody and you break it, I'll be like, oh no, man, right? So it's definitely a great point.
You definitely will take care of those things. And there's so much value that comes from delayed gratification. It's not like I want it, I get it. I want it, I get it. There needs to be I want it, I still want it, I really want it. And then that gratification comes. There's something that I think in recent generations, we've lost a little bit of that gratification that comes from just waiting and planning and working. It's just like, I want it, here it is. Now I want something else. Now I want something else, squirrel, right? So there's a lot of value from that. And that's something that we have a great opportunity to help our kids learn. And using money as the tool for that and finance, and budgeting and things like that would be a great way to do that in any household.
Excellent. So a follow-up question I have with that, that I know as a parent, should I be giving my kids allowance? That's come up a lot too. Or at what age should we start giving them an allowance?
Oh, I think when they're little, but I don't think allowance should be, it's so controversial. I don't think allowance should be just earned because a week went by or a month went by or, Tuesday went by. So you get money. That's not how the world works. We don't just get paid because it's Friday or because it's the 15th. We have to do something. There's some performance element that is related to that payday. And so I think that's one of the things we can help kids, right? If we help them learn that early, even as toddlers, even as school age kids, where they perform or they present some kind of a value, they perform some kind of an outcome, then they are compensated for that. That's really going to help them later. If you do the work, you get the grade. If you go to work, you get the pay, right? So I don't think it should just be given to them just because, or to, shut them up. That doesn't work for me. But coming back to allowance, an allowance is fine if it's tied to some performance. If there's some minimal level of contribution to the household, you make your bed, you set the table, you help with the dishes, you wash the car on Saturday morning, whatever. If there's things that they're doing to earn it, then I think it's fine to have a payday on regular intervals, and it kind of helps them learn with their spending plan, right? Their budget. But if they don't have that, they just get paid for time. It doesn't work for me. And then the question becomes, well, how much should they earn? At what age? What do they have to do with their money? Are there things that I still provide, or do they, are they independently living? So there's a whole curriculum for that for anybody that's interested on allowance versus earning chores. And I think it's really, really important to make that distinguishing, I guess, system at your house, and make it work for you. And then what do they do with the money when they get it, right?
Yeah. So before I talk about we talk about the book, you just mentioned something about them for being what should they be taking care of. So one of the questions I also have is, what as parents, what should we have them pay for themselves? I know that's going to teach them discipline as well too.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It's different because we have 5 children and they're all totally different. We even have identical twins and they're totally different and always have been.
Wow.
Different values, different ideas, and things like that. But you'll have one child that really likes nice things. I'm going to save up. I'm going to have a $50 T-shirt or no T-shirt at all. And then you have others that I don't really care. I'll just go get the $2 T-shirt and, buy another one when that one gets holes in it, right? So everybody's different and everybody has different values for different kinds of things. So it really needs to be a personal program for each child and then in each household. So for some people, they really value clothing. They really value, their appearance and grooming and things like that. Not that we shouldn't groom, but some put more effort and more time and money into those kind of things. If they do that, then you're going to need to have an allowance that allows for that if you want them to spend that money. So maybe they'll need an extra $50 a month if they're buying their own clothes, if they're doing their own haircut, or for a girl getting her nails done or whatever it is. They're going to need a little bit more. That $10 a week isn't going to cut it, right? Or 20 even, maybe, if they're on clothing. But if clothing is just part of what happens at your house, and at Christmas and Easter and their birthday, they get clothes for school and, things like that, and they don't need to use their budget or their own money for clothing, then they wouldn't need as much. Now it's pretty much maybe they pay part of their own cell phone bill, or if they want to add games to their collection, for gamers.
Right.
If they want to go out for pizza with their friends, or they want to go, buy a really special gift for a friend for a birthday party or something, and that's on them, maybe you could go halfsies on that, or you could just say, your allowance includes everything that you're giving to everybody else too, so you better really make it work. So you just got to be clear. As the parent, you want to make sure whatever you put in place, you're consistent. Don't change it every other month, because they need that consistency. Whatever the rules are, build it and then implement it.
Oh, that's excellent. So, which brings me, you spoke about your children too. And I know that the book, Teen Cash, there's stories here about your kids too, which I found very fascinating as well too. So can you talk a little bit about how this particular book came about, and also what the purpose of the book is? I know I'm working with this through my son, but I want folks to hear this and also offer another resource for them as well.
Yeah, there just wasn't anything. And I went to the faith-based sector. I went to, back then we had bookstores that you could stay in for hours. Now they're few and, far between. But
right.
And we did a lot of that. We would go to the libraries, we'd go to the bookstores and spend hours. And that was, we'd go to the park, go to the library. That was our thing. And so there were so many resources for adults, mostly investing, and then on the faith side, what God says about money, things like that, but not a lot of how do I do that at my house? How can my kids learn what I learned the hard way without having to have the hard knocks? And
right.
So I just wrote it. I started speaking on it throughout, the country. I did a lot of MOPS and moms groups and things like that. I used to speak quite a bit to these young parents, giving them tools and resources at work. And so I put all that together, and then there were videos and DVDs and all that. But this little book was actually written by kids for kids. And it has a DVD that goes with it that gives you little vignettes, so they can watch the story unfold. But all the little things, like when you go to buy a car, everybody's going to want to have a nice car at some point, right? They start thinking about that. Boys about 12, girls about 14, thinking about their car. And one day they're going to get a car, but they think the price tag is it. They don't think there's tax on that and there's registration on that. And then you got to keep the tires going and you got to put oil in it. Oh, and then there's gas and there's insurance. You know, there's all of these costs that go with a major expense like that, a major purchase like that. And how would you know that unless somebody told you, or you did it the first time and went, oh, now I get it, right? So that really kind of pinched my budget because I didn't think about those other things. Or the one, you know, you forget your first job, you're working at the burger place, you're working at the theater or wherever, you know, lifeguarding, whatever it is, you get that first job and you can't wait to earn that money. And you know exactly to the penny how much money every hour you're earning. And you know how many hours and you get a paycheck, and that's not the number you expected on the paycheck. Oh, where did the money go? And you don't know because there's all those initials and all those deductions, and then you get the real paycheck. Like, where did it go? Well, how would you know that if somebody doesn't tell you, right? Before you have that experience. And so it goes through things like that. You know, when you write a check, and anymore people don't write very many checks, it's all electronic, or they go to the wall, just pull the money out of the wall. Or it's just Venmo, you know, back and forth, or bank transfers. They don't really see what a check means. And a check is a contract, right? A written check is signed and it's a contract. And you're promising to pay the bearer, to pay the person that you wrote it to, or the company, utility company that you wrote it to, that money is there and they get to have it. So if you don't have the money in your bank account that you're promising they can have when they get that check and put it in the bank, that's a crime. I mean, you're breaking a promise, but it's actually a crime to do that. And they don't know. They just think, oh, well, I'll just, you know, shift it over. And if it's NSF, no sufficient funds, then it's okay. We'll just put it back later. No, that's actually not okay. But how would they know that if nobody told them? You know, you're not going to get this in math class at school, probably.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
Things like that we can do at home, or things that you can use as curriculum with a child or a young adult, can really make a difference to prepare them.
So, folks, thank you for joining us this morning. We are speaking with Judy Copenbarger. This is our Money Truth Moments every Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Please follow Judy at judycopenbarger.com. There's a wealth of information, resources available. Today we are discussing and we are talking about married with teenage children. We cover some great questions. We've had some great answers as well too. And we just finished talking about another book that Judy has called Teen Cash. And I love the fact too that you have the 4 C's, which is the car, career, cash, and class, right? That's like just hits every aspect of that as well too. So folks, if you want some more information, you have additional questions, please post them on the chat. Send Judy a message also on Facebook. You can use LinkedIn and some of the other social media platforms as well, so she can get back to you on that. So I wanted to share on a side moment is that a lot of our viewers have been wanting to ask questions, but for whatever reason, they're kind of embarrassed. So they've asked me, you know, hey, can you ask this particular question? So I'm creating a list for us to talk about because they don't feel comfortable putting it on the chat because it comes up on the screen. So they're all like, oh no, you know, so I found it kind of funny, but at the same time, very interesting that they have specific questions on some of the topics that we've covered. So your wisdom is definitely getting out there. So that's awesome.
I'm happy to make that offering for sure.
Let me ask you, now that we're talking about saving money and all of that. So how do we prepare our kids for work or to work independently? And I'm going to follow that up with another question too regarding college. But how do we prepare them to for the workforce, or just, you know, to be independent?
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what we talked about early, just practice. Have them practice working at home. Have them practice working for a friend or for grandma and grandpa. There's a lot of value to a work ethic. I've always been a worker. I think some people are naturally workers. They love the production. They love the results. You know, they love the outcome. And others really don't. You know, I think we're somewhere on that calibrated scale. But I've always been a worker. I've never thought of work as a 4-letter word, like a bad thing. I think it's wonderful. Whether it's physical work, you know, as an athlete, you get that physical, like, ow, I really
Right.
felt that. It feels good. It's kind of like, I'm tired, I'm sore. Sometimes you finish a work day and it's just like, if you're using brain power rather than physical power, it's like, man, my brain just needs a break. It's just my brain worked really hard today. That was hard work. Or when you're studying, you kind of like, oh, just need to turn off and just let that percolate a little bit. There's something good about that feeling. So if we help our kids practice working, that's probably the best preparation for when they get out there and actually do work. If they're learning a trade and they're in a family business, watching you work, they'll learn a lot more from you by watching than what you tell them, right? Observing is how kids really get it. Or if they're in a trade where they're working with their hands, they're in construction, they're learning some kind of art form or, fixing cars, things like that. Having them practice that, on the weekends, get out there with Uncle Joe and, work on the carburetor, things like that. If they're students, you get a lot of work ethic from just going through post-secondary school because you've got to write the paper on time, you've got to read the material on time, you've got to participate in discussions and projects and things like that. So doing that work and practicing for that, I think, is the best preparation for the workforce. Some things might not make sense. I've told this to my kids, so it's just like, very familiar. It doesn't make sense why you have to write that paper. It doesn't make sense why you have to make that project that way. But when you get out in the world, your employer is going to say, do it this way. I have a background in finance and law as well. And every county, when you file papers, has its own way. And if the staple's at the top and not on the side of the top, they'll send it back and you have to start all over and usually pay to file again. If you're using a blue background instead of a green background or a certain type or font that's not exactly what they asked for, and it's like, that makes no sense. I just did it 2 miles away last week. It makes no sense. But practicing for those unreasonable requests in a job or in your professional life, I think, is really valuable. You just sometimes just do it. Doesn't make sense, but it's my job to do it. So I think that's the best preparation, just doing something besides playing games on your computer or watching movies, right? Do something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So tell me, how do we plan for college for kids? Or do we let them pay for it themselves? Do we help them? What's a good approach to that?
Yeah, that's a very personal and familial thing as well. Some people want to leave that legacy of education, and I work with a lot of clients that's important to them. They want to leave money for kids to go travel the world and do mission trips and be educated, pay for post-secondary education and even grad school sometimes, which would be great. Our approach was, it's funny because Larry and I put ourselves through all the way. We did our own college, junior college, university, graduate school, law school, and all that. We paid for everything. Nobody ever bought us a book or did a thing. We never asked for it. We just took our time and did it. We'd save up, and then take a class, and save up and then take a class at first. But for our children, we put them through private school the whole way and paid for undergrad, college. And that was just a gift we wanted to give them so they could focus on other things, and they all have. So while they're going to school, they can do other humanitarian efforts. They can do other mission work. They can travel and do other things instead of, working a summer job. They can study. And it's neat because the first two kids, they did really well in high school. So they took all those AP classes and honors classes and things. So they both were able to get out of the university in 3 years, almost 2.5 years, because they had so much credit going in, college credit. So that worked out really well for us tuition wise, but it freed them up to go do other things and help other people and launch their own businesses and ministries. So that's our approach. But to answer the question for people, I think whatever your plan is, you've got to do it, get your heads together, because maybe it was done one way for one spouse and a different way for the other, and you have really strong values about that. You need to decide early, way before you're filling out FAFSA forms, right? How do we want to do this? Do we want to help them to a certain point? Do we want to help them for, a certain number of years? So if it's an 8-year undergrad program, maybe we'll pay for the first 4 or 5. whatever the agreement is, come to that early so the expectation is there for your child. So they're not thinking, oh, college will be paid for, and all of a sudden it's not.
Right, right.
Or they're not thinking, oh, I got to work my buns off, just try to get through school. I'm never going to make it. Maybe I'll do something else because that sounds hard and I'm going to be alone in it, when that's not your intent. So just have open communication and come together as a family with the plan. Maybe it's different for each child as well, depending on their plans and their dreams for education. And then financially is probably the biggest way to prepare. I don't know if that was part of the scope of your question.
Right, right.
So early enough would be that answer. Start saving now. At the baby shower. Start that $529.
I will tell you, this kind of goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about when we buy our own stuff when we're little. We're working really hard to do things. So this also applied, and I'm going to share this really briefly with you too, because I remember when my parents were paying for college for me, and that's a whole lot different story, but I'm going to make it really short and simple. I noticed that looking back that I wasn't as serious about school because they were paying for it. But the moment I decided to say, you know what, I'm going to take care of this on my own. I don't want your money or whatever, save for what you need to do and all that. I noticed that exact same immediate change. It's like, okay, now this is costing me an arm and a leg, so I better get my butt in gear and all of that. So, I mean, it's incredible that it just ties in from when you're little, starting with that, to when when it's something as big as college and paying for it on your own. It just makes a world of difference. And that's just my personal story with that, But,
that's a total GPA booster. When you're paying for those classes and you do the math and figure out how much it is an hour to be in there, you're going to be at the office hours. You're going to be calling that professor. You're going to be stalking that professor to get your money's worth. Squeeze.
Absolutely. So Judy, we had one of our viewers ask us an impromptu question, and we can answer it now or we can save it for another show. But what they wanted to know is, what do you recommend a person do that has about $150,000 in liquid cash? Do you recommend maybe the stock market, money market, bonds, or leave it as liquid in the event the elections cause major uproar in money distributions? This would have been great for our last week's show as well too, because we were talking a lot about this too. Yeah. So we can post it or you can answer it. It's totally up to you.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the time. I know we have our favorite segment coming up, so maybe we'll add I'm dying to answer that question. I've got an answer. But maybe we'll add that to the Q&A. Maybe next week could be a Q&A session for all of those anonymous questions. And we'll just knock them out. It'll be a variety show. So this viewer will need to stay tuned next week, and we'll make sure that we answer that thoroughly and properly.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
I can.
Okay, I don't know where I got cut off, or for whatever reason we had a disconnection. I had a disconnection problem here on my end. So I wanted to get to our favorite part of the show, which is our challenge. Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about last week's challenge, and then we can fire away?
Of course. Last week we talked about retirement a little bit. So the challenge was to come up with 3 things, pen and paper. What can I change to boost my success in retirement? What can I do differently that will make sure that my retirement is what I dreamed of and I'm not running out of money before time? The second thing to write down is what can I do specifically? What action can I take right now in the next 48 hours to move me toward that successful retirement? And then the third thing is whatever you wrote down, tell somebody. There's power to your words. Share that with somebody. Write it to somebody, text it to somebody, have a conversation in your house, run out in the street and tell your neighbor, whatever. Tell somebody what you came up with.
You know, and I want to get folks to respond to that as well. So maybe we're going to add some of these answers to our Q&A show for next week as well, too. So we can share some of this. So what have you got for us this week? I'm dying to know.
Well, we were talking about not so much young children, but teenage kids, school-age kids today. And I think we ought to wrap a challenge around that. So if you have them at home, and if they're students, they probably are at home right now, so you have access to them. If you don't have your own kids around or grandkids around, find somebody's young people to help. So I think working with them, tell them what you know. Tell them what you learned about budgeting, and they don't know. Again, you just think it's so intuitive. It's not. When money comes into the household, you have so much money and you have a whole month's worth of things that need to happen with that money. Part of it is savings for a goal. Part of it's savings for long term. Part of it goes to taxes. Part of it goes to housing and doing your life. You got to have gas and food and insurance and things like that. So talk to them about where your money goes, where their money will go once it's their own money to use. What kind of invisible expenses are there that they might not think about? And usually insurance comes to mind, taxes on property and insurance and things like that. It's like, oh, I didn't know I had to pay that too. So talk to them about the allocation of your spending, where it goes. So if they're not your kids or your family, find some nieces, nephews, somebody that you can talk to about that. Just have a basic finance conversation. Talk to them about saving and what you've learned in your own life about the value of saving. Maybe a mistake where you didn't save enough, didn't have enough in reserve. And then a time when you did, you saved up, and maybe, in our generation, we'd save up for a house. And you'd save years sometimes to get the down payment together to, go from renting to buying a house. Maybe it was that first car that you saved up, or an upgrade, the dream car that you saved up for, or a special trip, to go backpacking across Canada, or to go to Hawaii for the first time, or to go see the Grand Canyon in an RV. So whatever it was, talk to them about budgeting, or I like to call it a spending plan rather than the B word, right? What you can have. So spending plan, and then savings. And then anything else, if they have questions, find a good resource to help answer the questions. And I'll bet you, if you're, in your 40s or older, your life and your life lessons and the things that you've learned the hard way are going to be the best curriculum ever. And just share with them. Find some young people and share money stuff with them. How's that?
That's great. And I'm going to definitely make it a point to bring that at our next show, which would be the Q&A, which I also think is going to be very interesting, because I know there's a lot of folks that are been wanting to ask questions that just are a little too shy to ask them up online or when we're doing this stuff live as well, too. So.
Yeah. Okay, John, here's the answer to your silly question. No,
exactly.
I love that idea.
No, that's awesome. So, folks, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you guys sticking around with some of my technical difficulties here. But it's been another fantastic show, a lot of great wisdom from Judy. Make sure that you follow her at judycopenbarger.com. This is another Money Truth Moments. Make sure you stick around every Tuesday at 8 o'clock. But most importantly, you have a challenge. Next Tuesday morning, we're going to have a very special show on Money Truth Moments. It's all about you, Q&A. So make sure you send us your questions. Judy's going to have a full half hour of just answering all of your dying questions here, folks. So make sure that you send that over to us. So, Judy, once again, thanks so much for being here on Tuesday, taking time out of your busy schedule. And would you like to say any last parting words for us?
I think my parting words this week would have to be, make it not about you. Make it about someone else with everything that even if you don't feel super skilled financially and you feel like there's some shame or guilt around mistakes that you've made, enough to really help a young person. And so make it about them. Find a way to bless some young people, to educate some young people. If you've got kids that are trying to get together and do their schoolwork, maybe you're a homeschooler or you are coordinating, with other families, to get the homework done, make finance part of their curriculum. Maybe this is the year, 2020 is the year to talk about money and start to give them the means, the education that they need, and then let them practice.
All right, awesome. Well, Judy, thanks again. Folks, make sure you follow again, Judy at judycopenbarger.com. We will see you guys next week, 8 o'clock in the morning for a very special show. Talk to you later.